I made a quick summary and a recap of another way of looking at this question of who designed, who invented the high power, and in that part. The high power has definitely been an evolution, starting with this 1927 Grand Rendement. We find 24 total parts. I consider the grip panels and the grip screws. Those are on everybody's high power. But other than the grip screws and the grip panel, you have 24 parts. By the time Dieudonné Save completed the P35, I counted up that he had designed 20 parts, pins, and springs. He eliminated 3, a net gain of 17 parts in the 24-part pistol. And that happened with the first P35 generation. Then when we had the redesign of the recoil spring guide rod and the external extractor, that added 3 total parts, and now Dieudonné Save is up to plus 20 net total added parts. Now, by comparison, I also made some notes. By comparison to John Browning's 1927 Grand Rendement and what we know about it from his patent paperwork, it changed from a more or less a striker fired, but with a breech bolt assembly, to hammer fired. The things that were lost in the P35's design was, and this is having to do with the first generation P35, no muzzle drop safety anymore, other than the firing pin spring, but mechanically there's no muzzle drop safety in the original P35. There's also no hammer drop safety in the original P35, and this meant that the drop safety, mechanical drop safety integrity that John Browning had built into the 24-part pistol, this got lost in the evolution to the P35. Also, what you gained for those 20 parts that were added was a gritty, unpredictable trigger, both in take-up, break, and somewhat reset. A much harder slide to rack. And this is inevitable because of the way the spring gamble was played into the P35. It just dictated a harder slide to rack, especially if the hammer is forward against the firing pin and you're racking the slide against that mainspring on the hammer strut and the recoil spring. So that's one thing that I think we can say definitely happened with the Dieudonné Save's journey to the P35. Also added was hammer bite. Also added was a procedure we call manual decocking. Manual decocking would not have existed on the 1927 Grand Rendement, but what it means specifically is this, the instructions for the P35 are if your hammer is cocked and you want the hammer forward, and this is, even on a loaded chamber, the instructions are you want to hold the hammer like this and pull the trigger, let the hammer come forward a little bit, let the trigger go, and then ease the hammer forward to the half-cocked position. A better way to do it is at the same time put your thumb right here, protect the firing pin, go through the procedure I just showed you. But this has been a subject that a couple of BH veterans have shared with us, that they had accidental discharges. Actually, three have now shared with us that they have had accidental discharges with a high power when they did that maneuver. For whatever reason, the hammer slipped. That is a heavy mainspring pressing against your thumb. And it just happens. And it made decocking the high-power pistol, the P35, a rather dicey maneuver because this hammer is so strong. The spring on this hammer is so strong. So that's a decocking maneuver that was added to the P35. This would not have existed in any normal operation of the 1927 Grand Rendement. Dieudonné Save redesigned the sear lever, so it now floated and did contact the sear before one would have any intentions of firing. Also, that came out of it was barrel with a design tendency to fracture, as we now know, as well as a firing pin retaining plate that has a tendency to fracture. Also derived from Dieudonné Save's completion of the P35 were magazines that stick in the pistol, especially out of a stock unmodified high power, and the necessity of a lot of tools to take one of these boogers apart. No longer could you do it John Browning way with no tools in sight whatsoever and using the slide stop for your screwdriver. This is, objectively, what we can say really was the sacrifices that were made between the 1927 Grand Rendement and the P35. I want to now talk about the Mark III. We're going to recap the Mark III betterments that were made to the high power pistol. That added two parts. It added an ambiside safety lever, and it added a sear lever spring. And for those two parts that were added, the ambidextrous nature of the manual safety was restored, which was a component of John Browning's original design. His manual safety was on the back of the bolt. It also locked the slide, like Dieudonné Save's manual safety did. But for only the addition of a net two parts to the design, the Mark III betterments positively positioned the sear lever. So the sear lever is no longer banging the sear when the slide comes home. It created a mechanical muzzle drop safety, restoring, again, another component of John Browning's 1927 Grand Rendement. And of course, the ambidextrous nature of the safety, we mentioned that. So, for a net gain of two parts, there's three things that were added back that would have been and were in the original 1927 Grand Rendement. So, at least from that perspective, it seems like Leon Hubert got good mileage for a couple of parts added back into the pistol, and it made some particular differences. Along came then this SFS system, or the fast safety system, that allows hammer forward carry. A lot of people have never really taken into account that the high power pistol was not specifically made to be carried cocked and locked. It was specifically being made for a military application, and most military sidearms spend their life, if there's ammunition in them at all, it's in the magazine, and it's a condition 3 kind of a proposition. And that's true for militaries virtually around the world, as I've always understood it. So the original P35 was not specifically made for what we would call carry today, or condition 1 carry. It's possible. The design is versatile, and yes, you can do it, and it's safe to do it. There are downsides to it, but in that thought, the 1927 Grand Rendement would have been perfect for a condition 1 carry. Also would have been perfect for a condition 3 carry. Either way, the high power in its original configuration with the original traditional operating system, we call it, that Dieudonné Save designed, it's really not optimal for a condition 1 carry application. Along came, again, Leon Hubert, and he designed a design that would make the high power pistol, in essence, equivalent to the 1927 Grand Rendement in terms of carry profile, in terms of redesigning the angle of the hammer so it does not any longer involve hammer bite, and he did that without adding a beaver tail or anything of that nature. The SFS system was really a restoration of a lot, or moving towards a lot of the original design of the 1927 Grand Rendement in terms of what it is and what it does, and how it looks when it's carried in a condition 1 application is a specific subject. John Browning had an automatic, truly an automatic slide stop. And Leon Hubert designed the extended slide stop and made it to where you can push it out with the slide forward, just like you see the pistol here. That's not automatic, but that's an easier takedown than was originally designed. So we see Leon going back and sharpening up the high power design and bringing it back, as far as characteristics and components and sort of item per item per item. One other thing about the SFS system also that Leon also did for the design is the SFS system has an additional drop safety part, and it's right there just below the firing pin. And it may or may not be able to be seen, but that's blocking the hammer to the firing pin, and it won't allow the hammer to go to the firing pin until the trigger is pulled. And that restored an affirmative mechanical hammer drop safety that, again, the 1927 Grand Rendement would have been drop safe, muzzle or hammer style drop. The SFS system was another, again, with the drop safety part, was another restoration of John Browning's original characteristics of the 1927 Grand Rendement. And then, of course, today, the BHSpringSolutions RDIH advanced trigger subassembly for the high power, we believe, leans the trigger action and the trigger design back. It's not possible to retrofit a sear lever that loses leverage on a lever style sear. That's not going to happen. But to the extent that the high powers trigger could have some characteristics, and it does have one characteristic, and that is you do hit a definable wall with the high powers trigger. That is warning that you are about to fire the weapon, and elimination of the grittiness of the magazine disconnect and the downsides of the original design of the high power trigger. We believe, and again with Leon Hubert's involvement, is these things cumulatively we can see how for a very, very low number of parts. By the way, SFS adds one part. For all the benefits that you get out of SFS, he didn't add 20 parts, he added one net part difference when you install SFS compared to the traditional operating system. We think that's when you clean up the sear hammer relationship, allow hammer forward carry, eliminate the hammer bite, add a hammer drop safety, eliminate the manual decocking. There's the other one. SFS users, when you have the hammer cocked and you want the hammer to be forward, you don't do that dangerous maneuver we were talking about anymore. You push the hammer forward and it's forward and it's on safe, and the entire pistol is then locked. Again, an operating system that it seems to bring back some of the general elements, not the specific elements, but the general elements, more like Mr. Browning designed in the 1927 Grand Rendement. I'm Mark Allen, BHSpringSolutions LLC and BHSpringSolutions.com.